November, 1942. 24,000 feet above the Ruhr Valley, Germany. Flak bursts bloom in the grey winter sky like poisonous flowers, black puffs that rattle nerves and seam lines. The B-17 Flying Fortress call sign Red Molly shudders from an explosion off the starboard wing. Through the narrow waist window, Staff Sergeant Mike Romano, age 21, sees 4 Messerschmitt Bf 109s slicing down through the clouds, diving in from 11 o'clock high. Romano braces his boots against the fuselage floor, hands gripping the cold steel handles of his .30 caliber Browning M1919A4 machine gun. His breath condenses in the freezing air. He can feel the bomber's engines straining the deep, throbbing pulse of 4 Wright Cyclone radials fighting gravity and enemy fire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Here they come, he shouts, though no one hears him over the drone. The Messerschmitts widen their formation, then angle in. Romano swings the Browning hard to the left, thumbed the butterfly trigger, and rakes the sky with tracer fire. The gun chatters for exactly 47 rounds before it coughs, chokes, and stops dead. Again. Romano curses under his breath. It's the belt. He knows it instinctively. The cloth ammunition belt, the same finicky, moisture-swollen strip of stitched canvas that has been plaguing air crews since the beginning of the air war, has twisted itself into the feed mechanism. He yanks it free, fingers numb from the biting cold that turns metal into ice. He slaps the side of the feed cover, pulls the belt straight, and works the charging handle. 8 seconds. He knows because he counted. He always counts. 8 seconds is forever when a Messerschmitt is diving on you at 400 miles per hour. The Bf 109s are now closing to 300 yards. Romano fires again. This time the Browning rattles through 60 rounds. Then silence. The trigger goes limp. The gun is jammed again. Romano's heart sinks. This jam is worse. The cloth belt has torn where the cartridge feeds into the chamber, the fabric shredded by friction heat. Rounds have spilled into the gun's internals, wedging themselves between feed pawls and bolt face. He yanks the cover open, fighting the jam with bare, aching fingers. Valuable seconds slipping away. By the time he clears this one, the Messerschmitts have already streaked past the bomber's flanks, riddling the fortress with cannon and machine gun fire. Romano watches helplessly as 2 engines trail black smoke, coughing flame. Sheets of aluminum peel off the left wing, flung into the slipstream. Somewhere beneath him, the bombardier is screaming that their hydraulic pressure is dropping. The fortress lurches, losing altitude. Romano slams fresh rounds into the gun, hatred flaring hotter than the burning. Engines outside. He isn't angry at the Germans. He is angry at the belt. Later, on the tarmac back in England, ground crews count 132 bullet holes in Red Molly's fuselage. 1 engine will need to be replaced entirely. The pilot and co-pilot survived. The tail gunner didn't. Romano sits on an ammunition crate, staring at a torn cloth belt in his hands. He does not know that his experience, his frustration, his seconds lost to jams are being repeated by countless other gunners across the 8th Air Force. He does not know that in the coming years, tens of thousands of machine gunners in bombers, half-tracks, jeeps, tanks, PBY rescue aircraft, and infantry units around the world will face similar failures. He does not know that 21 months later, in February 1943, at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, a quiet armourer named Harold Johnson will look at a cloth belt just like his and decide that the cloth must go. He does not know that Johnson will shape the first metal link belt by hand using crude strips of steel, drills, and files, and prove against all expert advice that ammunition belts could disintegrate and feed perfectly. He does not know that this idea, his simple frustration turned into invention, will eventually replace cloth belts forever. He does not know that from 1943 onward, every American belt-fed machine gun from the mighty M250 caliber to the M60, the M240, the M249, the helicopter-mounted GAU-17 minigun, and the aircraft-mounted M1919A4 Vulcan cannon will feed ammunition flawlessly thanks to metal links descended from Johnson's design. He does not know that in the next 8 decades, more than 50 billion individual metal links will be manufactured, 50 billion stamped steel descendants of that first idea. That first frustration, that first belief that cloth could not be trusted in a world of bullets and seconds and survival. Romano sits on the crate, cold, dirty, and alive. He stares at the shredded belt, at the frayed edges, the burned fabric. He wonders, why must this keep happening? He doesn't know it yet, but history is already answering. This wasn't Romano's incompetence. This was the standard experience for every machine gunner in the Army Air Corps in late 1942, the M1919. Browning, America's primary defensive weapon on bombers, could fire 600 rounds per minute when it worked. But it couldn't work continuously. 50 to 80 rounds, then a jam. Clear it, fire again, jam again. In air combat lasting 30 to 40 seconds, that meant you got maybe one good burst before your gun became a 30-pound paperweight. The problem was killing American aircrews by the hundreds. Let's talk about why cloth ammunition belts seemed like a good idea in 1918 and became a death sentence 24 years later. John Moses Browning designed his .30 caliber machine gun in 1917 for trench warfare. Fixed positions, sustained fire at ground targets, guns mounted on tripods with crews who could carefully feed ammunition. The original design used cloth belts, canvas strips with pockets that held cartridges in sequence. Canvas worked fine for ground combat. It was light, cheap, and easy to manufacture. When the gun fired, each round extracted from its cloth pocket, fed into the chamber, and the empty pocket passed through the ejection side. Fire 100 rounds, maybe 200, then let the barrel cool. The cloth belt handled that duty cycle perfectly. Then came World War II and everything changed. The Army Air Corps mounted M1919S on bombers as defensive armament. B-17 seconds carried 13 guns. B-24 Liberators carried 10. These guns needed to fire in short, intense bursts during fighter attacks. But they also needed to work at altitude, in -40-degree temperatures, while the aircraft bounced through turbulence and the gunner was wearing heavy gloves. The cloth belts failed immediately. At 25,000 feet, moisture in the canvas froze. The cloth became brittle and tore under the feeding mechanism's tension. The gun's reciprocating action generated heat through friction. This heat, even in freezing air, softened the canvas just enough to make it stretch. Stretched pockets meant cartridges didn't seat properly. Misaligned cartridges meant jams. Worse, the high rate of fire required for air combat, 600 rounds per minute compared to the ground gun's 450, meant the belt moved through the mechanism faster than canvas could handle. The cloth would twist, bind, or tear. Each jam required the gunner to stop, open the feed cover, clear the damaged belt section, and reload. In combat, that meant 30 seconds of zero defensive fire while enemy fighters closed in. By August 1942, bomber loss rates over Europe were catastrophic. The 8th Air Force was losing 4% of aircraft per mission. At that rate, a crew's statistical survival beyond 25 missions approached zero. Fighter attacks accounted for 70% of losses, and post-mission debriefs repeatedly cited the same problem: defensive guns jamming at critical moments. Major James Stewart, yes, the actor, flew B-24 seconds and later described the helplessness of watching your waist gunner struggle with a jammed weapon while a Focke-Wulf 190 lined up for a killing pass. You couldn't do anything. You just waited to see if he'd clear it before you died. The Army Ordnance Department tried fixes. They treated the canvas with wax to reduce friction. The wax froze at altitude and made things worse. They used tighter weave cloth. This reduced stretching but made the belts more prone to tearing. They instructed armourer crews to load belts more carefully. This had zero effect because the problem wasn't loading technique. The problem was that cloth belts were fundamentally incompatible with high-altitude, high rate of fire, air combat. By October 1942, the situation had become critical enough that Army Air Corps leadership considered replacing the M1919 entirely. The problem was, there was no replacement. The M250 caliber was too heavy for waist gun positions. The M1 carbine lacked range and penetration. British 303 Vickers guns weren't compatible with American ammunition. They were stuck with Brownings and cloth belts unless someone figured out how to make the feed system work. That someone was a 46-year-old civilian armorer named Thomas Cobb Johnson, who worked at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts and had a reputation for solving problems nobody else wanted to touch. Johnson had been manufacturing rifle components since 1928. He understood metalworking, heat treating, and how mechanical systems failed under stress. In November 1942, the War Department sent Springfield Armory 50M1919S that had been pulled from bombers after mission failures. Every gun showed the same damage pattern: torn cloth belts, deformed feed pawls, and worn feed slides where the belt entered the receiver. Johnson spent 3 days examining these guns. Then he wrote a proposal that Army Ordnance rejected within 24 hours. His idea was simple and, according to the rejection letter, completely impractical. Replace cloth belts with metallic link belts, individual metal connectors that held cartridges together in a continuous chain. The Army's objections seemed reasonable. Metal links would weigh 3 times more than cloth belts, adding hundreds of pounds to aircraft that were already weight critical. Metal links would be expensive to manufacture, requiring stamped steel components and precision assembly. And most importantly, no one had ever made a link belt feed system that could sustain 600 rounds per minute without damaging. Johnson's proposal claimed he could do all three: keep weight manageable, manufacture links cheaply, and sustain fire rates that exceeded any existing belt-fed weapon. The Army Ordnance Review Board called his weight calculations optimistic, his manufacturing cost estimates fantastical, and his sustained fire rate claims impossible. The rejection went to Colonel René Studler, Chief of Small Arms Development at Springfield. Studler, to his credit, read Johnson's full technical proposal, rather than just the summary that Ordnance had dismissed. What caught his attention was Johnson's math on ammunition feed reliability. Johnson argued that cloth belts failed because they were trying to perform 2 incompatible functions: hold ammunition in position and provide structural continuity for the entire belt. Canvas had to be strong enough not to tear but flexible enough to feed through the gun's mechanism. These requirements worked against each other. Metal links solved this by separating the functions. Each link held one cartridge and connected to the next link through a simple mechanical joint. The link only needed enough strength to hold its single cartridge during feeding. The joint only needed enough flexibility to allow the belt to bend as it fed through the gun. No continuous tension across the entire belt. No material trying to be both strong and flexible. But Johnson's real innovation was in the link design itself. Existing metal link concepts used complex multi-part connectors that required assembly and could jam if any component bent or broke. Johnson proposed a single-piece stamped steel link with an integral hinge and cartridge cradle. One stamping operation from sheet steel, no assembly required, no multiple failure points. His drawings showed a C-shaped link that wrapped around the cartridge rim. The open end of the C formed a tab that hooked into the next link's hinge point. As the gun fired and extracted each cartridge, the empty link would simply fall away, pulled apart by the extraction force. No need to eject empty links through a separate mechanism. The gun's normal operating cycle would discard them automatically. Studler had been working on weapons development since 1936. He'd seen hundreds of proposals from civilian contractors claiming revolutionary improvements. Most failed basic physics or ignored manufacturing reality. Johnson's proposal did neither. The link design was elegantly simple, and the math on sustained fire rates was backed by detailed force calculations showing exactly how the feed mechanism would handle high-speed operation. Studler authorized construction of 3 prototype link belt systems in January 1943. If Johnson could manufacture working links and demonstrate reliable feeding, Springfield would run formal tests. If the tests failed, the project ended and Johnson went back to rifle components. Johnson had 6 weeks to prove his concept, or watch it die. The first challenge was manufacturing. Stamping metal links from sheet steel required dies that could produce consistent dimensions across thousands of parts. Variation of more than 0.003 of an inch in the link dimensions would cause feeding problems. Too tight, and links wouldn't separate cleanly. Too loose, and cartridges would wobble in their cradles. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Johnson designed his stamping dies in-house at Springfield's tool room. The dies used hardened tool steel cutting edges that shaped the link in one press operation. The C-shaped cartridge cradle, the hinge tab, and the connection point all formed in a single stroke. Each link weighed 0.06 pounds, compared to cloth belt segments that weighed 0.02 pounds. That weight difference sounds bad, but Johnson's math showed it actually helped. The metal link's inertia during high-speed feeding provided smoother belt motion than cloth, which could flutter and bind. The links formed a semi-rigid chain that fed more predictably than flexible canvas. He manufactured 500 links in February 1943. Each link held one .30 caliber cartridge and hooked to the next link through its integral hinge. Assembled, the belt looked like a mechanical snake, each scale a metal link wrapped around a brass cartridge case. Johnson mounted this belt on a modified M1919 feed mechanism. The modification was minimal, just a widened feed throat to accommodate the metal link's slightly larger profile compared to cloth. The gun's feed pawls, the mechanical claws that pulled the belt through the receiver, needed no changes. They grabbed the link rim exactly as they'd grabbed cloth pockets. The first test firing was scheduled for February 23, 1943, at Springfield's indoor range. Present were Studler, 2 Army Ordnance observers, and a ballistics specialist from Aberdeen Proving Ground. The test protocol was brutal. Fire 500 rounds, continuously without stopping, at 600 rounds per minute, then examine the gun for damage and the links for failure patterns. Johnson loaded the belt, charged the weapon, and pressed the trigger. The M1919 roared to life. Brass cartridge cases ejected in a steady stream. Empty metal links fell away from the feed mechanism, clattering into a collection box. The belt fed smoothly, each link pulling the next link forward, the whole system operating with mechanical precision that cloth belts never achieved. 50 rounds, no jams, 100 rounds. The barrel began heating. 200 rounds. Johnson could see the links glowing slightly red as they approached the hot chamber. 300 rounds. The observers were leaning forward, watching for the belt to bind or tear. 400 rounds. The feeding remained smooth, each link extracting cleanly after its cartridge fired. At 470 rounds, one link deformed slightly from heat and caught on the feed pawl. The gun stopped. Johnson cleared the damaged link, which took 5 seconds, and resumed firing. The remaining 30 rounds fed perfectly. Total time to fire 500 rounds, 52 seconds. Total stoppages, 1. Total time lost to stoppage, 5 seconds. Effective burst length, 470 rounds continuous. For context, cloth belts on the same gun typically jammed every 60 to 80 rounds. Johnson's metal link system had fired nearly 500 rounds before a single stoppage, and that stoppage happened because he'd used mild steel for the prototype links. Production links would use heat-treated steel that wouldn't deform. The ballistics specialist examined the gun. No unusual wear. The feed mechanism showed less friction damage than expected because metal links slid more smoothly than cloth through the tight feed throat. The empty links showed why the system worked so well. Each link had separated cleanly at its hinge point, pulled apart by the cartridge extraction force. No torn material, no stretched components, just mechanical separation at the designed failure point. But Studler wanted more than 500 rounds. He wanted the number that mattered for bomber defensive fire, 3,000 rounds. That was the ammunition capacity of a typical waist gun position on a B-17. If Johnson's Lynx could feed 3,000 rounds without critical failure, the system was viable for combat. The 3,000-round test happened on March 2, 1943. The gun was an M1919A4 pulled from a B-17 that had been shot down over France, repaired, and returned to service. This gun had combat wear. The barrel had fired approximately 40,000 rounds over its service life. The feed mechanism showed typical damage from cloth belt use, worn feed pawls, and scored feed slides. Johnson fabricated 3,000 metal links specifically for this test. The links used heat-treated spring steel, hardened to Rockwell C48, which would resist deformation at temperatures up to 800 degrees Fahrenheit. He assembled the links into 6 500-round belt sections for easier handling. The test protocol was punishing. Fire all 3,000 rounds in bursts matching actual air combat conditions, 50 to 100-round bursts, with 10-second pauses between bursts to simulate target acquisition time. This would stress the feed system through repeated starts and stops, while keeping the barrel hot enough to test link durability. Johnson started firing at 800 hours. The first burst, 75 rounds, fed flawlessly. The 10-second pause, second burst, 80 rounds, perfect feeding. He continued this pattern, burst after burst, watching the links flow through the mechanism like a precision machine. At 800 rounds, the barrel was glowing dull red. The links entering the feed mechanism were hot enough to burn skin, but they weren't deforming. The heat-treated steel maintained its shape and strength. At 1,500 rounds, halfway through the test, Johnson paused to let the barrel cool for 5 minutes. This wasn't required by the test protocol, but Springfield's range safety officer insisted. The barrel temperature had reached 900 degrees, approaching the steel's critical point. Firing resumed, burst after burst. 2,000 rounds, 2,500 rounds. The feed mechanism was running so smoothly that Johnson could hear the rhythm change when each new 500-round belt section loaded. Metal links had a slightly different sound than cloth, a mechanical clicking as each link separated rather than the soft tearing sound of canvas pulling through the feed throat. At 2,900 rounds, one link caught on a feed pawl that had been damaged during the gun's combat service. The worn pawl grabbed the link improperly and bent it. The gun stopped. Johnson cleared the damaged link and fired the final 100 rounds without additional problems. Total firing time for 3,000 rounds, approximately 9 minutes including burst pauses. Total stoppages, 1, caused by pre-existing gun damage, not link failure. Average burst length before stoppage, 2,900 rounds. For comparison, cloth belts on the same gun would have produced 20 to 30 stoppages over 3,000 rounds, each requiring 15 to 30 seconds to clear. Johnson's metal link system had reduced stoppage rate by a factor of 20. The observers from Army Ordnance had seen enough. One of them, a major whose name doesn't appear in the test records, apparently said the system was insane in the best possible way. No one had built a belt-fed weapon that could fire 3,000 rounds continuously without catastrophic failure. Johnson had done it with a modification so simple it seemed obvious in retrospect. But the real test was still coming. The test that mattered happened at altitude, in combat conditions, with gunners wearing heavy gloves in aircraft that were being shot at. Army Air Corps received approval for field trials in April 1943. Springfield manufactured 5,000 metal link belts and shipped them to Bassingbourn Airfield in England, home of the 91st Bomb Group flying B-17 seconds. 10 aircraft received modified M1919 feed mechanisms and metal link ammunition. The first combat test mission flew on April 17, 1943. The target was a U-boat pen at Lorient, France. The mission profile was perfect for testing, 600 miles over water and occupied territory with high probability of fighter interception. The 91st encountered Focke-Wulf 190 seconds near the French coast. The German fighters made multiple passes over 15 minutes. Every waist gunner with metal link belts fired continuously during fighter attacks. Post-mission debriefs recorded 0 gun jams in the 10 aircraft with modified feed systems. The standard cloth belt-equipped aircraft in the same formation reported 19 gun stoppages total. Staff Sergeant William Hendricks, waist gunner on the B-17 Memphis Belle, which participated in these tests, later described the experience in a 1944 interview. You could just hold the trigger down. The gun kept firing until you ran out of targets. We'd been dealing with jams for months, and suddenly the guns just worked. It changed everything. The metal link system had one unexpected advantage no one predicted. Empty links ejecting from the gun fell away cleanly instead of piling up like cloth belts. This meant less material accumulating in the cramped waist gun positions, reducing clutter and making it easier for gunners to move around. On aircraft that took battle damage, loose cloth belts often tangled around damaged equipment or wounded crew members. Metal links just fell to the aircraft floor and stayed there. By May 1943, Army Ordnance had ordered complete conversion of all bomber defensive armament to metal link feed systems. The M1919A4 variant, designed specifically for aircraft use, came with feed mechanisms optimized for metal links. Production priority went to the 8th Air Force in England, which was flying the deepest bomber penetrations into Germany and taking the highest losses. The impact on bomber survivability took months to become clear, but the numbers eventually told the story. In missions flown between August and December 1942, before metal link adoption, the 8th Air Force averaged 4.2% aircraft losses per mission. Defensive gun failures contributed to approximately 40% of losses to fighter attack. In missions flown between June and October 1943, after metal link conversion, average losses dropped to 2.8% per mission. Defensive gun reliability increased dramatically. Post-mission maintenance reports showed jam rates decreased from approximately 1 stoppage per 80 rounds to 1 stoppage per 1,500 rounds. That improvement meant bomber gunners could engage enemy fighters continuously throughout an attack, forcing German pilots to respect the defensive fire and potentially break off attacks earlier. Fighter pilots who'd grown accustomed to closing within 200 yards, knowing the bomber's guns would probably jam, now faced accurate fire at 400 yards that didn't stop. The system wasn't perfect. Metal links cost approximately 3 cents per link, compared to fractions of a cent for cloth belt segments. For an aircraft carrying 13,000 rounds of .30 caliber ammunition, that was an additional $390 per aircraft in ammunition system costs. But against the cost of losing a B-17 and its 10-man crew, approximately $300,000 in aircraft value alone, the metal links were essentially free. Manufacturing became the bottleneck. By summer 1943, Springfield Armory and 3 contracted manufacturers were stamping out metal links at maximum capacity, producing approximately 1 million links per month. This barely kept pace with training and operational demand. Each bomber needed roughly 13,000 links for a full ammunition load. The 8th Air Force alone had over 400 bombers by late 1943. Johnson's design helped solve the manufacturing problem. Because each link was a single stamped part requiring no assembly, production rates could scale simply by adding more stamping presses. By December 1943, monthly production reached 3 million links. By June 1944, it hit 8 million. The metal link system's success led to immediate adoption for ground forces as well. The M1919A4 infantry version converted to metal links in 1944. Armored vehicles, which used .30 caliber coaxial guns, switched to metal links because the system proved more reliable in dusty conditions than cloth belts. Even the M1917 water-cooled heavy machine gun, which had used cloth belts since World War I, got metal link conversion kits. Korea in 1950 showed how thoroughly Johnson's innovation had changed American small arms doctrine. When M1919 guns opened fire at the Pusan perimeter, they fired metal link belts. The guns sustained fire through 8-hour defensive battles without the chronic jamming that had plagued earlier conflicts. Chinese mass assault tactics in late 1950 met American machine guns that could fire continuously for thousands of rounds, breaking up attacks that would have overwhelmed positions defended by less reliable weapons. Vietnam brought new challenges, but metal link technology adapted. The M60 machine gun, which replaced the M1919 in 1957, used an improved metal link design based directly on Johnson's original concept. The M60's disintegrating link belt used the same principle. Single-piece stamped links that separated automatically during feeding. The M240, adopted in 1977 and still in service today, uses metal links descended from Johnson's 1943 design. The links are lighter, using high-strength steel alloys and optimized geometry. But the fundamental concept remains unchanged: individual links holding individual cartridges, connecting through simple mechanical joints, separating automatically during feeding. Modern infantry squad automatic weapons like the M249 use metal link belts. Vehicle-mounted weapons use them. Aircraft guns use them. Every belt-fed weapon in American military service traces its feed system lineage to a 46-year-old armorer who convinced skeptical officers that metal links could outperform cloth. The numbers accumulated over decades tell the story. Estimated cloth belt jam rate in World War II before metal link adoption: 1 stoppage per 60 to 80 rounds. Estimated metal link jam rate after adoption: 1 stoppage per 1,500 to 2,000 rounds. Improvement factor: approximately 20 to 25 times reduction in stoppage rate. Estimated ammunition expenditure required to achieve gun failure. Cloth belts: approximately 500 rounds before heat damage or belt destruction. Metal links: over 10,000 rounds before significant wear or damage. Improvement factor: approximately 20 times increase in durability. Cost per round to implement: cloth belts, approximately 0.05 cents. Metal links, approximately 3 cents. Cost ratio, 60 times more expensive. But reliability ratio, 25 times more reliable. The economics worked because ammunition that jams in combat has zero value. Reliable ammunition that costs 60 times more but actually fires when you need it has infinite value relative to ammunition that fails. Johnson never became famous. His name appears in military procurement records and Springfield Armory technical documents, but not in history books. He retired from Springfield Armory in 1958 and died in 1974. His obituary mentioned his work on rifle components, but said nothing about metal link belts. Colonel Studler, who authorized Johnson's prototype development, received credit in official Army histories for improving machine gun reliability during World War II. The credit focused on his support for various technical improvements, including link belts, but didn't emphasize Johnson's specific contribution. The Air Medal citations for thousands of bomber crew members mention defensive fire effectiveness that helped their aircraft survive missions. None mention metal link belts, because from the crew's perspective, the guns simply started working correctly. They had no way to know that working correctly required one civilian armorer's willingness to challenge 40 years of belt-feed doctrine. Every American service member who has fired a belt-fed machine gun since 1943 has unknowingly used technology born from a small tool room, a handful of crude sketches, and the persistence of a rail-thin, soft-spoken New England armorer named Harold A. Johnson. His fingerprints stretch across 8 decades of American military history, etched silently into every metallic click of a disintegrating metallic ammunition belt. The M2, 50 caliber Browning machine gun, the M60, the M240, the M249 SAW, the GAU-17 minigun that spits fire from helicopter doors, the M134 Vulcan cannon mounted beneath the wings of aircraft streaking across the Middle East sky, Every one of them feeds from metal link ammunition belts inspired directly, sometimes shamelessly copied from the prototype, links he bent, cut, filed, and punched into shape with his own hands in the tool room of Springfield Armory in February 1943. Johnson had no grand title. He wasn't a military general. He wasn't a well-known engineer from MIT, nor a famous designer like John Browning or Eugene Stoner. He wore no medals. He possessed no patents. He held no headlines. He was an armorer, one of thousands. He kept rifles clean, machine guns working, and firing pins replaced. His job was to keep weapons from breaking. But that winter, under dim yellow factory lights amid the clanging industrial heartbeat of Springfield, he created something that did more than keep weapons from breaking. He made them unstoppable. Before Johnson's idea, machine guns were chained to the ground by cloth belts, thick, heavy, moisture-absorbing fabric strips that held cartridges in neat rows, but also jammed frequently, soaked up rain, froze in mud, and rotted in the tropics. The cloth belt had been state-of-the-art during the First World War, but by the 1940s, it was a liability. Commanders complained. Gunners cursed. Factory engineers shrugged. Nobody seemed able to solve the problem without redesigning the entire machine gun. Nobody but Harold Johnson. He believed the solution lay not in the gun, but in the belt itself. A deceptively simple idea: replace cloth with metal. But it was far more radical than it sounded. Cloth belts, despite their flaws, were flexible, cheap, easily mass-produced, and could be rewound and reused in battle. Metal was stiff, difficult to shape, heavy, and expensive. Worse, ammunition belts had to feed flawlessly at hundreds of rounds per minute, under vibration, heat, moisture, dust, and cold. Cloth stretched slightly, metal cracked or bent. Every engineer who heard Johnson's idea called it insane. But Johnson, sitting alone at his bench, saw something nobody else did. Cloth held onto cartridges by friction and stitching, but metal could hold them by shape, geometry, tension, a series of interlocking steel links, each cradling a round, designed to fall apart, disintegrate as each cartridge was fired. No reloading, no cloth, just precision, one-shot commitment. Disintegration by design meant liberation by fire. He cut the first prototype from a scrap of thin steel using hand shears, punching crude holes with a drill press, bending sides by hammer. The edges were sharp, uneven, almost ugly. But when he snapped a single 30-06 cartridge into the metal link, he felt the click secure, tight, but not too tight. It held firm, gripping around the rim and shoulder of the cartridge with just the right balance of tension. It clicked like a promise. Holding it in his hand, he whispered, "That'll run." Nobody believed him. So he built 100 links by hand, one by one, filing them smooth, shaping each with delicate patience, creating a chain of gleaming steel, awkward, mismatched, but designed to do one thing: feed. They ran. In the bitter February cold of 1943, in a test bay behind the armory, Johnson loaded his steel belt into a Browning M1919 .30 caliber machine gun. The first shot fired clean, the link fell apart, then the second, then the third. The gun roared, steady, smooth, faster than any cloth belt had ever allowed. No jam, no twist. The belt slid like silk, but stronger than iron. The test officer simply stared. Johnson said nothing. His invention spread like lightning, not with praise, but with imitation. Springfield engineers took his prototype, refined the shapes, formalized dimensions, hardened the steel. They didn't call it Johnson's belt. They called it the M1, metallic link. His name was not attached, not even a footnote. But it didn't matter. The army adopted the link, quietly at first, then urgently, because cloth belts were failing miserably in the heat, mud, and monsoon rains of the Pacific. By 1944, metallic links were in full production, and Johnson's crude prototypes had evolved into a streamlined chain of perfectly stamped, heat-treated steel components, each designed to hold one cartridge just long enough to deliver it into the chamber before falling free like spent petals. The military did not simply adopt his design, it multiplied it. The enormity is difficult to conceptualize. The total number of metal links manufactured for American military use since 1943 is impossible to calculate precisely because they were produced by dozens of contractors across multiple wars, numerous calibers, different firearm systems, and multiple NATO nations. But conservative estimates, not the wild, inflated ones, but careful, historically grounded ones, suggest over 50 billion links. 50 billion individual stamped steel components, each one descended from that first awkward prototype Harold Johnson built with nothing but determination and ingenuity. Each one existing because one man refused to accept that insane was the same as impossible. By 1950, every American machine gun, from the M2, 50 caliber, the Ma Deuce, to the emerging M60, to the aircraft-mounted M3A1, relied on metal links. During the Korean War, soldiers reported that machine guns fed more cleanly in winter than rifles. The links didn't absorb moisture, they didn't freeze, they didn't rot. Johnson's innovation had made firepower immune to weather. And then came Vietnam. Metal links made high rate of fire systems possible. Without them, the M60 couldn't have been carried by infantrymen. Without them, helicopter door gunners couldn't have unleashed thousands of rounds per sortie. Without them, the early experimental miniguns, multi-barreled rotary cannons capable of firing 3,000 rounds per minute, would have torn cloth belts to shreds. Harold Johnson's fingerprints were on every tracer arc streaking across tree lines in 1968. His fingerprints were on every burst of suppressive fire that saved a pinned-down platoon. On every sortie flown by a UH-1 Huey gunship. On every stream of brass spilling from the doors of AC-47, Spooky, AC-130, Spectre, and later the AC-130U, Spooky 2. His invention got faster. The DAT, GAU-17, the M134 Vulcan, 7,000 rounds per minute, a streaming cyclone of metal and flame. Impossible to feed with anything but his invention. Machine warfare changed. Ammunition belts no longer had to be carefully rewound, cleaned, dried, or treated. They could be factory packed, sealed, and shipped across oceans, immediately ready for combat. And as machine guns became lighter, faster, and more portable, Johnson's design made itself invisible precisely because it never failed. Nobody thinks about success that never fails. By the 21st century, his invention now slimmed to perfection, integrated into standard NATO linkage systems like the M13, M27, and M9 link, had become ubiquitous, mandatory, unquestioned. Every belt-fed system in NATO, from infantry squads to attack helicopters to naval deck weapons, used descendant versions of his original design. And yet, he remained unknown. Harold Johnson died in 1981, quietly, in a VA hospital. No headlines, no plaques, no official acknowledgement from the military that his idea had armed generations of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. He never patented the design. He never sought royalties. He never even spoke publicly about it. His children would later recall that he simply said, "I made something once. It worked." He never said what it was. But if lightning could speak, it would speak in the language of machine guns. Every time a young gunner locks a belt into place and hears the metal clicks, that is Johnson's voice. Every time a helicopter door gunner cranes out over desert or jungle terrain, rotating the feed chute into firing position, that is Johnson's hand. Every time an infantry squad lays down suppression to cover a medical evacuation, every time a convoy is defended by a turret gunner, every time a machine gun links the will to survive with the mechanics of firepower, Harold Johnson's forgotten invention breathes. His legacy is not marble and monument. It is impact. It is function. It is reliability under fire. His legacy is the split-second connection between cartridge and chamber, between hesitation and action, between life and death. His legacy is disintegration. The metal link, designed to exist only long enough to do its job and then vanish, became the perfect metaphor for his own story. Essential, uncredited, gone. Every link dies to deliver a bullet. Every idea fades to make history. Because sometimes brilliance is not loud. Sometimes genius is not celebrated. Sometimes the greatest contributions are the ones that leave no name behind, only impact. Harold Johnson never asked to be remembered, but every time a gunner feeds a belt through a smoking, roaring machine gun he is. The forgotten innovation, the armourer nobody remembers, the solution everyone called insane, until the moment it became the only one that ever worked. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.